Somebody could describe a situation as being, oh, I'm finding that challenging in a negative way. Because it's challenging, I'm not sure that I want to participate in it. And yet the positive implication on that is, are you up for the challenge? So just in the actual language itself, the interpretation of it is really key, I think, for leaders.
The question is from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Paul.
Hi, I'm Ricky.
Hi, I'm Rich.
Hi, I'm Rob.
And we're all from Thinking
Focus. We've been trying to say it at the same time forever. We're all from Thinking Focus. Let's move on.
Let's move on. And today the question is, what sort of culture are you creating in your business? And we're talking in particular about challenge or threat cultures.
The question is from Thinking Focus, a podcast about how we sometimes get in our own way and what we can do about it.
Okay, as defined by. So what do we mean by challenge culture, Rich?
Well, what we're sort of talking about here is some work that's more familiar, if you like, in sports psychology, but also quite a bit of work has been looked at in terms of business as well. So challenge state, kind of having a similar position in your thinking, if you like, to fight in terms of fight and flight. So a challenge state would be one where you are feeling motivated, where you are looking forward to what's happening, where you feel that learning can take place, and where you feel sort of up for it, whatever it is. Yep, that's challenge. And threat being sort of similar to flight in fight or flight. So one where you feel that perhaps there is a threat, you feel nervous, you feel less likely to speak up, you feel more likely to want to avoid a situation.
I think the key word there is the feel as well, isn't it? So there may not be a threat. It's just this perception of threat that you have that's going to bring you to that threat culture.
Yeah, I think that's right, because a lot of this, of course, is all in your head, isn't it? And it's how you are thinking about what's going on in the organisation, but also you've got your own experiences and things that have happened to you in the recent past or the further past that are coming to the fore in this as well.
Yeah, because you might be reacting to something that isn't in that organisation. It's something that's in your past employer or that's happened to you, many years ago. I always think sometimes our understanding of a manager is very much based on the first person we work for, not the person we're working for now. Because that's when we created this prototype of, is my boss challenging me and demanding I do better, or is my boss a threat?
Yeah, and for this might not also. This could be the culture in an organisation, but we also know there are microcosms of culture everywhere, aren't there? In some departments, in some teams, it's different to others, as well as there being kind of an overall culture. But this can also be situational as well within a business. So it could be that monthly meeting or that weekly meeting when you need to go in front of the senior leadership team. You might view that as being a time when, without thinking about it, you access a challenge state and you feel up for it and you see that this is a great opportunity to kind of show off. But you also might access a threat state when doing some of those things. So you might play it very safe and feel very nervous.
So that's interesting because we can almost replay the question, what sort of a culture are you creating in your business, and replace the word culture with mindset. So, if the recognition that the culture in the business is the behaviors that we exhibit, the way we do things around here, actually to have a big impact on that, what we could be talking about here is what mindset are you creating in your business? Because challenge state and threat is really all about mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, and if it's situational, then I guess you've got to perceive a situation to be dangerous or challenging, haven't you, in order to access fight or flight or challenge or threat. So there's got to be some sort of recognition within your own body and within your own physiology that something's going on here. And this threat could be, or this danger could be, actually, it could be damaging for my career. It could be damaging for the perception others have of me. It could be damaging towards, my review at the end of the year, whatever it might be, or the opposite of that. So it's not something perhaps that's going to happen all the time, every day. Although depending on the real culture in the organisation, you could find yourself operating in one of these states more than the other.
Your description made me think of some of the stuff around anxiety and panic, and the sort of self-fulfilling bit of that. So actually I perceive a threat of some form within the environment. So let's just imagine that I don't normally get to go and talk to the big boss. And now for some reason, I'm in the room with the big boss. And I've had an experience from the past that maybe is not that positive in that scenario, or I've heard stories about it. And so part of my brain goes, there is a threat, and that's going to cause a chemical reaction. That's going to cause my body to adjust to that. And, I'm in that fight and flight that we were talking about earlier. I'm ready to move. But that can easily be mistaken. So I can actually now go, I'm standing in front of the boss. My heart is beating really fast. Therefore, there's a reason for that. I'm under attack. And you get into this kind of weird spiral of threat. So I wonder if these sort of threat cultures are in the same way quite spiraling, that actually the threat I am seeing isn't the real threat of, that my job is at risk, or I'm going to get, a good ticking off if I do something wrong. I'm actually reacting to the culture. I'm reacting to the perceived culture, the idea of what it might be like, and I think that's right. Yeah, and if you think about things that people have to do at work, whether it's go and meet an important customer, maybe there's a big deal on the line, and you've got to go meet them, whether it's digitally or physically. The same things at play there as again, isn't it? Is this excitement I'm feeling about this? Heart beating faster, I'm looking forward to this, I want to do it? Or is this nervousness, anxiety that I'm feeling? And I'm not sure we're always great at understanding which is which as well.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, if you think about, Paul was talking about or alluding to the sort of chemical reaction that happens in our body as well. If we just isolate that to adrenaline, if in a situation of either challenge or threat, adrenaline will kick in. The adrenaline is going to either help you to meet the challenge, or it's going to help you to remove yourself from the threat. But it does have that impact on your thinking and your behaviors.
Well, it does. And interestingly, when you look at this in sports psychology, what they talk about is if you're in a challenge state, then actually you become more efficient both in your physiology and in your cognition. So, more blood's getting around the body, and therefore you're able to make better decisions. You're perhaps able to move quicker. Whereas if you're in the threat state, then your blood vessels actually constrict, therefore limiting the amount of blood and oxygen getting around the body. Therefore your cognition's not as good, so on and so on. And you can easily play that out then into the cultures that we have in business. And if you're managing a team and you are a heavy directive sort of stick over carrot type manager, to really simplify it, and you operate through fear, then you can see that that's probably the state that you are causing your people to be in, which means they're going to make decisions that aren't as good as they otherwise might. They're certainly not going to be as creative as they might be, and they're certainly not going to create a feeling of sort of happiness around the team.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of the sort of positive psychology element of that, which talks about emotional states and the idea that kind of negative emotions, those kind of, fear and anger and frustration, are really designed to focus your brain. They kind of turn you into a laser. You're focused on a problem in front of you. Now the challenge in modern working world is often it's the wrong problem. You're focused on not fixing the challenge in front of you, but not getting shot by the boss type thing. But positive emotions, joy, happiness, those kind of things. Barbara Fredrickson called that a broaden and build theory. This idea that it's those emotions that help us become more expansive and see new things and make connections and discover more, because we're more open to the world when we have positive emotions.
And as well within this, you look at how can I control my thinking, and we talk about that all the time, and there's some clear steps I think within this, which is catching your thoughts. And if you can catch a negative thought, how can you reframe that into a positive and into a learning experience? So you're more likely to be able to induce challenge cultures as a leader if you are talking to people about learning and what the positive aspects of coming out of any learning are, what you can do differently, how you can move forwards, as well as talking about what's within your control and what's outside of your control. Because a lot of people, we've said it in other podcasts, we worry about things that are outside of our control. Well, actually, if we do that, that's more likely to induce a threat state. So as a leader, what are you talking about? Are you talking about what are we going to do? What can we do? Where can we put our effort? What have we got control over versus why it's not fair, why it's not going your way, why the other departments aren't doing what you need them to do, et cetera, focusing on things that are outside of your control.
Yeah, and I guess as a leader, what we're trying to do is set up that environment so people can think that way. Because if we just put all the pressure on the individual to go and manage your thoughts, actually, that's not going to work. We're social creatures. We are going to adapt to the environment around us. And if the environment is placing pressures on us that we can't deal with, and we see other people around us feeling that way, well, why would we not feel any other way? We'd be crazy to stand out and say, no, that's just in my head. I'm going to work through this.
But I think that the point here is that if we get this wrong, the limiting factors on the organizational performance, on the individual performance, it just doesn't create an optimum state to perform. So that challenge state that Richard talks about is all about creating an environment where you want to stretch, you want to look for that growth mindset, as Robin indicated earlier. What you're really looking for is how do we create a safe environment where people feel able to share what's really going on and not feel threatened by that. So they're not going to feel that that's going to reflect on them in a particular way. It's not going to play out in a way that they feel then at risk, and therefore re-emphasizes that feeling of being threatened, and therefore fight or flight would trigger. What we really want to do is create an environment where they can be open, because actually that's where the disruption in a positive sense, the creativity, as Richard described it earlier, will play out.
Yeah, and I think that's really true. And I like the idea of calling it a challenge state. It's not a comfort state. There's nothing nice about it in some ways. You are challenged. You are in a position where your whole body is going, your whole mind is going, it's step up time, as opposed to a threat state where it's going, be careful time.
And in that language exactly there, you've described it. So it's where we choose as a leader to kind of say, right, how do I help my team step up to this challenge? What are the behaviors? What are the things I should be saying? What are the behaviors I should be demonstrating myself and encouraging from them? What goals should we be setting? What's within our control? And all of that in a positive way, as opposed to the complete opposite, which is to focus on what's going wrong, what's not working, and inducing that thought process in them, which, as you said, Paul, in previous podcasts, we tend to have a negativity bias, which can lead us into threat state, which can then lead us into paralysis.
Well, look at the negativity bias just on the word itself, because somebody could describe a situation as being, I'm finding that challenging in a negative way. So in other words, it's too challenging for me. It's because it's challenging, I'm not sure that I want to participate in it. And yet the positive implication on that is, are you up for the challenge? Let's recognize that there are challenges here that we could face, not problems, but challenges. So just in the actual language itself, the interpretation of it is really key, I think, for leaders, as well as we've been talking about, the recognition about how people might perceive challenge versus threat.
And that means as a leader, we need to balance for the people around us the demands of the roles we're expecting them to do and the resources they have available. Resources being the practical tools, but actually time and effort and skills and all of those things. Because what we know is where resources are high and demands are high, that's actually where you get the most engaged people. The most engaged people want to be stretched, want to be pushed, want to be challenged. But where the resources are high and the demands are low, that's a boring job. Where it's all low, there's no resources, there's no demands, well, why bother? But actually worse than all that is where we put high demands on people without the resources, you're going to burn them out.
And exactly that. If the demands are beyond my belief in my ability or our ability, and the demands are too high, then I'm more likely to have negative thinking about it, and therefore that starts to create this sort of threat culture. And let's be honest, how many organizations do we work with where the demands are high and many, and you can see people within those cultures, you can see it in the face thinking, can I do this? Can I cope with this?
Yeah. Because they don't believe they have the resources available, either in terms of how much time they have, and again, that's a classic one at the moment, particularly with people move to work from home, that they're working longer and longer hours to achieve the same thing because, the demand is higher than the resource they now have available to them. A resource that might have been fine 6 months ago. They might have been able to get all of this done in the office, no problem at all. But in an online environment, everything's a little bit slower, a little bit more complex. And so, but the demand hasn't changed. In fact, it probably went up, to be fair. And eventually that moves to a threat culture because I'm now, I'm seeing problems all over the place.
And we've heard recently between us, different roundtable discussions that we've been involved with some of our clients where the report in is, people have really stepped up. Despite the situation, I'm finding that some of the people in my team or entire teams are as productive, if not more, working remotely than they were before. Now, there's a potential car crash waiting to happen there because then there's an expectation of some cultures and some businesses to go, we can do more with less. But how sustainable is the current remote working pattern where actually others report to us that it's a longer working day. We never switch off. We feel like, we're always on demand.
Yeah, I can think of a conversation I had recently with a fairly senior person who was very aware that the business is now saying, well, why do you need all these people if half of them have been furloughed? And when you talk to them really quickly, you go, well, because actually you're only doing half the work. You're doing the stuff you have to do, not the stuff you should be doing. And that's not sustainable over the long term. You get away with that for 6 months, but eventually you're going to have to do all the other work. But that's not seen. What's being seen at the moment is, well, you've only got half the people. Do you really need them back?
Yeah, because they're not engaged in growth projects, are they? And they're not engaged in changes and different, thinking about how they operate in different markets and all that. They're kind of just protecting the business and
they're doing the bare minimums, and they're doing it really well. Don't get me wrong, they're doing it really well, but that's not sustainable over a long term. And if you try and do that over the long term, that's when the threat culture comes in, because eventually it will stop working.
So this. Sorry, Ricky, go on.
Well, what I was going to say is, when we think about the work that we do with our clients, it never ceases to amaze me that when we can get the mindset right, the growth mindset in particular, create that psychologically safe environment, just how far they can go, whether the resources are limited, whether the resources are constrained, by changing some of the mindset, the attitude, creating that challenge culture, just how far we can take people. I mean, we've seen some exceptional results when we've created or helped our clients to create these environments where they are more challenge-led, but they are built on a foundation of this safety, this psychological safety, where they can really surface the key issues in a positive opportunity kind of way rather than a challenge negative kind of way, as Rob talked about earlier. I think we can really, it is possible to really step up and go beyond what we think is possible because of those attitudinal changes, those trustful environments that we've helped to create.
Because one of the biggest factors at some point is where do I believe this ceases to be challenging and becomes threatening? And that is created not by me, but by the culture that I'm within. So if the culture is one of blame, if the culture is one of, consequence, severe consequence, then actually I'm not going to push myself very far before we enter the threat.
That essentially would be threat, because you would in that culture think, I've got to do the minimum that will get me through this. Your goals are, just listen to the way I said that. I've got to do the minimum to get me through this. That's actually a sort of a negative, away from focused goal, isn't it? It's not a positive, it's stated goal. It's a negative thing.
And why would I ever do anything voluntarily that's above that? I might get it wrong. I mean, I have to do the minimum, so I'm going to risk that just so I'm here tomorrow. But anything that's, discretionary above that, I'm not going to try, because if I don't try, I can't be blamed.
And I think now is the time for people that lead teams, lead businesses, to think about the culture change that they've just gone through, and they might not even have thought too much about it, because it might have been, we're just working a bit more remotely or whatever. But actually, everyone's gone through a culture change. Everything has changed, hasn't it? In the way the game's changed, in the way that you played it before. And therefore, unless you get hold of this right now and think, right, what's the culture that we want? Do we want a challenge culture, a threat culture? What do we want? Unless you get hold of that right now, then one will emerge anyway.
Yes, and how do we communicate? Let's make the assumption that people, organizations would like to create a challenge culture for all the good reasons that we've spoken about here. Without communicating that effectively, putting the right resources in place, so people can understand the demands and where they sit, that could be very easily be perceived as a threat. Yeah, because it's all in the perception of the person on the receiving end going, too challenging, so it's now threatening.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point, because it's going to be really easy for me as a leader to set up a threat culture. I don't have to work really hard to do that. I just have to shout a lot and raise my eyebrows at the wrong time. And a challenge culture is going to take hard work. It's going to take effort. Your point, I think your question earlier, Richard, is we have to decide. The reality is there is no decision here. You need to have a challenge culture. Threat cultures will work against you, and you might get away with that for a while. But long term, you're diminishing the people. You're not going to get the best out of them. And when the world becomes good again, the best people are going to go and work somewhere that's much more fun.
Which I think is a really great note for this to finish on.
I agree.
Well done.
Thinking Focus works with teams and business units in organizations around the world, helping them achieve breakthroughs by enabling them to think differently. To find out more about our work and how we could help your organization, go to www.thinkingfocus.com.